Hello everyone, welcome to this session of programming in Python. So far we have already covered three sessions, right from the starting to know what is programming, what a Python is, and how it is relevant to you guys in your career, in your academic researches, and and then we started to learn the basic syntaxes of Python. In today's session, we'll be morely focusing on what the data type is, right? So as you can see on my screen, few of the terminologies you might be familiar already with. We have like discussed already in the previous class what a variable is, how to store the content in a variable, how to ask user to provide the input, and once we have gotten the input from the user, and once we have stored the input in a variable, which is nothing but a container, we eventually print it out on the screen, right? So we have followed the whole cycle. Take the input, store it, and then print it, right? Let's now look more into depth about this content that we are asking the user or that we are storing in the variables. As you all would know, like variable is nothing but a meaningful name that we give to any storage, and this is the storage that is going to store the content for us. It could be an integer like minus 500, 100, or 0, or 2, or 3, anything. It could be a characters, it could be a word formed out of characters, it could be a sentence, which we call it as string, right? So a variable which stores data, this data could be of different types. One of the type of data is integer, one of the type is float. Now float is nothing but decimals that you all would have been dealing in your mathematics, the numbers or the numericals with dot, the decimals, that is what we call technically as float in Python. And then there is something called as string. We shall be looking more about it into detail and depth in little further into the slides, but let's quickly give a quick revision to what we have already learned in the previous classes. So as you can see on my screen, uh, there's a definition about variables, and you can see there is certain examples about variables. I have created a name, I'm storing Arun in it. There is a height, I'm storing 182 in it, and there is a weight wherein I'm storing 70.5 in it. And as you can see, the name as I have given, they're so meaningful that they intuitively convey what is being already stored in it, right? And in a similar context, you see here there are different assignment to the variables, as you can see on my screen. Going forward, this particular slide tells you that how to do multiple assignments. So when I say multiple assignments, all this while I have been assigning values in this particular format, right? Say if I am writing or creating a storage or a variable which goes by the name score, and I'm scoring 150, which I'm storing this particular variable. In that case, in the next line, I would say player name, right? Wherein I'm storing, say, Sachin. However, if you observe, Python as such expects that you start the instruction in the same line and you end it in the same line, right? And if you have to give another instruction, you have to move on to the next line, something like this, right? However, in case you bring it to the same line like this, it is going to give an error. So if I try to run this, you see here, it has started giving the error. But the moment I shift this instruction to the next line, you can see here, it has moved on to the next line. And it is giving no more errors. I try to print it. It is going to conveniently print the answer for you. You see, 150. Now, what if you want to bring both the instruction in the same line like this? But Python doesn't allow that. So one way to go about it is you have to put semicolon in it. In other programming languages, this is very common practice, and it's a convention that after each instruction you have to compulsorily put a semicolon at the end. But in Python, it is not necessary. It is not mandated. But if you are bringing two instruction in a same line, in that case, you'll have to mandatorily separate it by a semicolon, right? So now if I try to print here, score, it is not going to give you any error here, right? So this style of writing instruction, or this style of giving instruction to the machine, is called as multi-line instructions. I hope that's clear to everyone. Yes. So in the previous class, since we have already discussed about creating a variables and storing data in it and printing the data, let's learn what all different types of this data could be, isn't it? Say we as a humans, uh, we also take inputs, we also take data, whether it's through the visuals through our eyes, or whether through the uh, uh, audiometry through our ears, or whether it's olfactory, or whether it's feel, or whether it's through the memory or the emotions. There are a lot of emotions that go through various sensory organs, which we process and compute in our mind, and we interpret those input data, and then we act, right? uh, in a similar way, since these programming languages have been created to get the works done by machines, we somewhere deep down making those machine work just like we humans work. Take the input, process the input, and output something. And this input data, which we human works in a similar way, even your machine work. But your machine doesn't have data which comprises of any emotions or thoughts or feel or something like that. It comprises of only certain distinctive type of data, which is integer, float, string, and there is more to it, but we will go slow. Let's first cover up what an integer is, what a float is, and what a string is, right? As you can see on my screen, there are quite a few mentioned here already: numbers, strings, list, tuple, dictionary. Let's broadly classify our data into: one is either mathematical kind of data, and other could be non-mathematical. This is although not a technical segregation, but for our better understanding, we can go by this. I'm pretty sure you all would have come across the data kind of 1, 50, or 8,000, or minus 500, etc. Right? Either the positive side of data or the negative scale of data. We can categorize such kind of data as integer. Okay, integer. This integer is also written in a short form or the abbreviation as int. You have another category that is called as float, which we in our daily life refer to as decimals. Say, and that is something like 50.56, or a temperature value like 22.5, or on a negative scale it's something like 85.8, etc. Right? And then you have something called as complex number. Complex. I'm sure the people among you who has the mathematical background, they would know that we in our 11th grade or the 12th grade we had learned that there is a real part in, and then there is an imaginary part followed by I. These kind of data are also represented in Python. However, this is mostly used by people who are involved into high scientific calculations. So when we are going to create the variables for ourselves to store the data could be mathematical, which could either fall in the category of integer, float, or complex. It could be numbers like this, it could be decimal like this, it could be complex number like this. If not this, your data can also be of type which is called a string. As an abbreviation is known as str, and this, guys, could be a character like A or A or say America, or I can write perhaps a statement in itself. Say I can write India is the largest democracy. Not just this, string is not only a character or a word, or it's just form of the sequence of word. A string kind of data can contain even the numbers, and not just number, mind you, it can even contain the special characters like these symbols which you would have come across many times. Okay, it can contain. So tomorrow if I have to create a data something like uh, World Cup 2023 hashtag, then what is this kind of data? It doesn't exclusively fall in integer or float or complex category. This type of data is falling under a category of string. But can you write the string like this? No. You should always enclose your string with an extreme quotes. So there should be a leading quote and there should be a trailing quote. All right. Yes. So this is what you see on my screen, that Python has 5 standard data types. For now, I will try to keep your focus towards string, float, and integer mainly. So as you can see on my screen, there is something called as numbers. So 1, 10, all these things can be stored. These numbers can be integer type or float type or complex type. Let me enlarge my screen here. If your data is falling under any such category, 10, 100, minus 786, 80, minus in the minus scale, positive scale, or in the decimal category, then it is going to fall under float. Then there is something called as string, as you can see. String, let me elaborate again on string. If I'm creating statement, maybe I can write Sebastian Vettel is a great sportsman. It is if my data looks like this, or maybe I can create some more characters in it. You see, my string data doesn't only contain the capital case, but it also contains small case, the space, hashtag, numbers, and it is all encompassed within quotes. And mind you, the quotes need not be double quote always. It can also be single quote like this. It can also be double quote as previous. It can also be triple single quotes like this, and it can also be triple double quotes like this, right? And if I try to print it, you will see that all of them shall be rendered to you on the screen, because all of them are equally legally being treated as a valid string in Python. So Python is able to recognize that it is a string kind of content, because we have wrapped the whole content between the extreme leading and ending quote. So the quote is the sign. These are the kind of markers. It tells Python that whatever is falling in between them is actually forming up to be a string content. With that, what if I have a quote here? So like I told you that there is a starting quote and the ending quote tells the start of the string and end of string. But what if I put a quote in between, which itself is a part of data? Now here you can see that it is going to throw an error because Python is getting confused. It was expecting that the quote shall only be found at the beginning and at the ending, but here it is finding in the middle. Because, and I have no choice, but I have to keep that quote in the middle because that is a part of data. And that is the reason why we have the different type of quotes in Python which we can use. So since I know that single quote is forming up to be data, in that case I will use double quote at the extreme end and shall resolve the error and I can go ahead with it. Something like this. All right. Yes. So what we have learned so far is we have a basic data type. So what is data type? Data type is nothing but it's a type of data that we are going to deal with. And the one of the categories that we have learned is int. Okay. So example could be weight, wherein I'm storing 55 is a weight, or I can say height, where I'm storing 182. The second category of data that we have learned is float. This is nothing but the decimals which we deal on our daily life. Something like temperature today. Here I'm going to store 22.5. So this is always decimals. If I write again, maybe I want to write weight again. I can write 50.2. This is the weight here. The third that we have learned the category is string, right? str. str is any data. Now str could be numbers, str could be float, str could be alphabets, str could be a mix of special characters, anything and everything. If that is enclosed within the leading and trailing quotes, if it is enclosed within two quotes, it shall be treated as string. So something like I can say name equals to Rahul Dravid, right? This is a quote. If I write statement, I can write Africa has largest number of countries. I don't know if this fact is correct, but let's hope it's correct. Perfect. And you see here I used single quote here, double quote here. Well, it's up to you. You can use either of it. Okay, we have a lot of options, and these are very basic. Of course, there is one more type of data that I think we should be looking at, and that is called as bool. Bool is nothing but boolean. So you have just either true or false. So if I'm saying student result passed, so perhaps this is a storage which is storing whether student has passed or he has failed in his assessment. I can perhaps store true or I can store false, right? Well, that's Boolean type of data. With this as basics, what we have just learned is that since we are going to deal with Python as a programming language, we are going to give the instruction to the machine. The machine is going to deal with the data. It's going to read the data from the sensors or various inputs. It is going to process that data. This data at the core is going to be either of this category in Python programming language. It could be integer, it could be numbers, either positive or negative, like 55 or 82. It could be decimals, which in Python we call it float technically, which could be 22.5 or 50.2, as I have mentioned here. Or it could fall in the category of string. Now, string is a mix of numbers and string, like we have just seen, or even the special characters. And then we have something called as Boolean. A Boolean is something wherein you store either true or false. Okay. So that was all about basics of data types. Data types is one of the important pillars in Python. You need to have very strong hold on it. And going forward, these individual data types are going to be a chapter in itself. We are going to learn more in depth. But as of now, since we are going to start programming, we are going to start taking the inputs, deal with the data that you have taken as an input, project it as an output. We should know that what kind of data that we're dealing with. Okay, so that is it for this session about basics of data types. We shall be learning more in depth going forward individually.